All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Shane Snipes. We are live on YouTube, as this is one of the ways that we like to share information about a program that was originally created at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, which is part of the City University System of New York, one of the largest university systems in the United States. And it's exciting because the BMCC is actually also one of the largest community colleges in the CUNY system and in New York State. So we have a very special relationship with folks who come from very diverse backgrounds and have a lot of different perspectives about what their communities are, what their neighborhoods are, how to connect to their neighborhoods. And they often come in with less effective tools for doing research. And so one thing that we wanted to do with the CEEP program is we wanted to address the problem of students not necessarily understanding how to do original research and how to conduct research in a methodical way. So different than, say, a research paper. So that's one of the main premises of the CEEP program. The other main premise, which we'll have other webinars on, and you'll be able to find that down below on YouTube soon, is what is impact and how do we actually measure impact over time inside the CEEP program? What are some opportunities for impact? And we'll also discuss things like the research questions that students who are undergrads, freshmen and sophomores come up with. What sort of questions are they struggling with? What are they attracted to? Types of concepts and themes. So look out for those videos below as well. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to my colleagues who are working on the CEEP program. Jessica Pitts has been with me from the very beginning, and she was one of the first research assistants, and she's been mentoring a lot of the students when it comes to getting them into the research methodology. She has, since the program started, she actually was admitted to a PhD program. So she's currently working on that. So she's got her own research on her mind right now. So welcome to the webinar, Jessica Pitts.
Everyone, excited to be here. So I've been working on this project for a while now. So I've kind of had some experience with some things that do work and don't work. So we're going to be talking about that today. So I'm excited to be here.
Very good. And I'll just add, our other guest is Tristan Rodriguez. He recently joined us and has been getting up to speed with the different things that students are working on. He's seen some of the prior research and reviewed it, gotten it up on the website. He's also a great storyteller, so he's going to be working with us on some of the stories that we'll be able to encapsulate and draw out that are part of the CEEP program. It's a pretty special program in that way. So welcome, Tristan.
Yeah, great to be here. Like the professor said, I'm definitely fresh, but I've already seen so much of our students' work and potential. And I'm excited for this semester's awesome work to come out from our students yet again.
That's great. Thank you, both of you guys, for being here, because I'll be looking to you guys for different anecdotes and ideas that relate to the content that we have. So let's get started. All right. So here, like a lot of our webinars, we like to go over how the Citizen Entrepreneur Explorers program kind of lays across a class and what it actually looks like. This picture is actually a picture in Chinatown, New York City. So it's a great picture to encapsulate a lot of what we're talking about with the vibrancy of the neighborhoods and communities, which we want to capture with the CEEP program. You know about us. Next slide, please. The 5 steps of the CEEP program are on our website, citizenpreneurs.com. And these are the steps. Find that research question, something that sparks the student's imagination. Look to find different ways to measure that thing and come up with different measurements that you can use for that. This is their first discovery sometimes. And exposure to things like qualitative and quantitative research, or what it means to do observations, and how do you actually turn that lens or that particular toolkit to solve a particular problem. The data collection step is the third step. And what happens there is students actually go out into their neighborhoods, into their communities, and talk to people, organizations, businesses, and explore that question. So sometimes the questions might be around gentrification, or they could be around organic products. They could be around the way folks are addressing certain social issues that might be related to business or to the community itself. The data analysis step is usually a pretty straightforward one. We don't get into a lot of detail with data analysis because we feel like the first 3 steps are so important. And in a semester-long class, which is when the CEEP program usually happens, what happens with the CEEP program too is it's layered underneath or above another part of the class. So it becomes its own project sometimes. One of the things that I've worked with in various times that I've taught it is they can become separate projects that all add up to a total project, or they can be taught as one long project with different steps throughout. And I've taught it each way. And I think either way works well. The other thing I would say in the last step is the community outreach step. This is called the report back step inside of a lot of the materials, because we want the students to actually go back to their neighborhood and report what they found out. We don't want this to become another notebook that's sitting on the shelf behind the student in their bookshelf in their room. We actually want it to be knowledge and information that gets delivered back to the community so that they may not make big decisions on it, but it will be a new awareness building and relationship building opportunity for the student and connecting to their community. So the 5 steps, there they are. Next slide. So CEEP in the classroom, we're talking about CEEP materials and modules for seminar long programs. We really want to think about some things there. And I think in order to get us some context for that, I know that, and Jessica, you've been part of the program now for several semesters. And one of the things when we're talking about a semester-long program with something like a Canvas program or a Blackboard program, it actually digs into that opportunity and gives us a chance to see what it looks like within that context. We'll also take a look at that if we do have time today. But look for other resources inside the comment section and the description section in the YouTube video below, because we'll go into a template that you'll be able to use inside of Canvas that's available to you. Now, the general timeline, this is something that I'd love for Jessica to take a look at and review with you, because she worked really hard on a lot of these worksheets and she pulled them together, and her revisions and changes and updates to these have continued to evolve. And this first one is pretty special. So just talk through that.
Yeah, so the first step is the research question development. So this is where students brainstorm different topics that are relevant to their neighborhood. And so as you can see, this is kind of the first page of the actual worksheet where they actually, so we want students to write things down. So a lot of times you can get stuck in your head. So there's like 4 different circles here where they just write different topics. So it doesn't have to be a full sentence. It just has to be a topic. So to get them thinking and putting their thoughts on paper. So that's kind of the format for that. And over the course of 1 or 2 weeks, students will work with faculty or mentors to kind of craft and refine their research question. So that's kind of what this research worksheet refers to, kind of the first step.
Yeah, and what we're finding when we've worked with this now for several different semesters, and it's been evolving each time when we intersect with a new set of students. This semester, one faculty at BMCC is using it in his SBE class, and another marketing faculty is using it in her class. So 2 faculty have already come on board to think about like how something like this could apply to a marketing class, for example. So that's kind of an interesting idea. if research questions become more than just market research, right? If we move into community engagement as a component of, in a marketing class, as a component of them understanding marketing concepts. So that's one thing that can happen too. We're talking about week 2, the research methods piece. This cannot be underestimated because it gives the students some tools that they'll be able to use in other parts of their school career or in opportunities in other places. Oftentimes these days with technologies and different things like that, there are survey tools and other things that have been put out into our environment, like Google Forms, for example, is readily available, free to use. So a lot of research methods around whether it's survey data or gathering information from groups of people or interviews, recording audio, because we carry around with us these supercomputers now. So with this supercomputer, I can record audio and or video during the interviews, and that allows me to do a lot more with in terms of collecting the information. But you have to map it out first. We need to know what questions are going to be asked. We need to know if it's a survey, what areas that the survey question is going to be covering within that question. So let's say they wanted to cover gentrification of a specific community. Well, what are the dimensions of gentrification that you want the questionnaire to actually cover? So students get into those types of questions, which is pretty elaborate, especially when you consider that our people don't think of freshmen and sophomores doing this type of research and getting into that kind of detail. And we've seen some great success. You can check out citizenpreneurs.com and see some more examples of that, including the one on gentrification that's highlighted there. Step 3. So in this, where it says week 3, the great thing that you notice about something like this is if you're going to teach a month-long summer class, you could actually do week 1, 2, 3, 4, and you might even combine some of these steps together in a week, because oftentimes in summer school, you're teaching 4 days a week or 5 days a week, the same class. And that means you get that connection to the students very quickly. And if you're concentrating, let's say your research question in the first week, you could do research methods in the second week, data collection and analysis in the third week, and in the fourth week, do the outreach. So there are ways that you can actually build it that way when you look at the general timeline. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, even as we talk about data collection right now. The data collection piece, and this is, I want a little bit of insight from Jessica on this one too. And that is, when we're talking about data collection, people freak out because they hear the word data and they think they have to go out and do science experiments and other types of things. So one of the things we try to do inside of the class is we demystify this idea that data is simply you having a specific structure to gather information and then record it and capture it. So that's when we place it in those simple terms, I think it makes it much more approachable for undergraduates. I'd love for Jessica to mention a thing or two, though, that might relate to students getting hung up on data collection and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it depends on the experience of the student. So some people haven't had experience with the process of reaching out to people. So, sending emails, dropping by if they feel comfortable to the specific entrepreneurs or businesses that they're trying to collect data from. So that process kind of is the biggest roadblock I see students coming up against, because it's for some of them it is very nerve-wracking. And so it's like, how do I do this? And where do I get the information from? How do I, because, and also another thing that people get kind of stuck with is contact information sometimes. So if you're running a restaurant, it may be hard for a student to get in contact with the restaurant owner who's busy and may not have a direct email to speak with. So I think those are kind of the roadblocks in terms of data collection. But breaking it down, I usually tell students to reach out to as many as many businesses as possible, so that they expand their net in terms of So if, for example, if a student wants to ideally get 5 responses in a survey, they would potentially reach out to 10 because several may not respond. So I think that's the thing that is most important to think about in terms of data collection is what do I want my sample to be, and how many people do I need to reach out to get that sample?
Yeah, and I'll just add here, when it comes to data collection, we're not necessarily looking all the time for a statistical significance. Sometimes the process itself is what we're looking to match up. So that could mean, for example, with surveys, okay, we give a number of 20 that we want 20 unique surveys delivered, or sometimes 2 or 3 interviews, because the interview process can actually result in a lot of data, especially if we don't tell the students early on to make sure that they are limiting the interview time and they're not spending, say, 30 minutes talking to one person. Even 20 minutes sometimes is a lot of data if you're chatting with someone who has a lot of ideas or a lot of stories. So those types of situations, when it comes to data collection, it's really important to kind of set those limits as part of what we're talking about. And that will also help with timeline. So if you're talking about undergraduate students working with undergraduate students through this process, and graduate students could also benefit from CEEP just because of the way that CEEP is structured and focused on entrepreneurship, but also focused on neighborhood connection as part of the research itself. So with undergraduates, you really have to think about those pieces and keep it in mind when you're pulling those ideas together. With data collection, setting the limits and making it very simple is what we are striving for, because we wanted the process to be more fun than grueling and more engaging for them as something that they can take pride in, having spent time walking through a fairly complicated process for an undergraduate and then pulling that out and perhaps having an impact. So next slide. So week 4 is data analysis. So if we're on that 1, 2, 3, 4 track, that's more like a summer school track than it is a regular one. The data analysis worksheet, I really like this one. I think it goes over some of the basics of data analysis. And whenever we're talking about data analysis, more than likely we're talking about using a pretty straightforward and basic tool like Google Forms or like SurveyMonkey, or something that will have that kind of accessibility for the student. And then when we're talking about the data analysis for, say, an interview, I know that Jessica has worked some with students to try to get them to utilize some more tools. And she can talk about some of the ways that they have attempted to use some of the tools around textual analysis that relate to interviews and some of the things that have happened there.
Yeah, so for the surveys, mostly students use Google Forms, which is pretty nice. So you make a form and then it automatically updates the information into a spreadsheet, which could be really handy for students because they can make graphs, so they can visually represent their research. For those doing interviews, there's so many transcription services. I recommend Descript, which is a transcription service that will take your audio from an interview and then translate that into Word transcript, where it's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. You may need to like clean some things up, but it's pretty accurate, and they get a transcript so where they can go and then find themes throughout the interview. So common themes related to the research question. So those are kind of the things that I usually recommend students using, depending on what survey method they're using.
I will add to that too, that whenever you're talking about the textual analysis of some kind, there are actually free tools out there that give you like a word limit of what you want to do for textual analysis. So let's say you wanted to pull all the text that someone had talked about and said. After you review it, listening to the audio and watching the transcript, you make the revisions to what was going on with the interview so that your text is accurate. Another option I've seen other people do this in prior classes is they'll take their phone and they'll set up a Zoom meeting so that the Zoom is doing the transcription for them, because Zoom, the college level subscription that we have for Zoom, you actually get an audio file and an audio transcript or a textual transcript from that audio file. So that's an opportunity as another way to review what you're doing and utilize tools that are already perhaps available to your students. So do keep in mind that if you are using Zoom, there is, as part of the Zoom tool, that transcription service. And then a quick search or two will find some free text analysis tools that you can use within that context. So next slide. So this is where when we take it up a notch, right? Like the first piece was like summer school. If you got 4 or 5 weeks of summer school, sometimes 6 weeks of summer school, then the prior timeline would work. Now we're shifting over to what a semester would look like. So 2 weeks on questions, 2 weeks on research methods, about 3 weeks on data collection, and then about 3 weeks on data analysis, or 2 weeks on data analysis probably, and then shifting gears to community outreach. There is a really important step to take early on in week 1 and 2 to have the students either in a general assignment go out on a map and find nonprofit or community organizations that are in their neighborhood. Oftentimes students don't know that something is within a mile or two. In New York City, it might be within a few blocks radius is what we're setting our limits at, but some rural areas, it might be 5 miles, right? Or 3 miles, but we really want people to connect to something that's very local and not necessarily just go online and find something to email, but more importantly, find something local that they can reach out to and build a connection with. With the pandemic and everything else, the option is to do like a web chat in a community meeting, a Rotary Club, a professional organization, that type of thing. Something really powerful was always in the back of my mind and in the structure of when I wrote the original grant that Kauffman gave us for the Knowledge Challenge grant. The idea was that it wasn't just about the students getting their information from their community and kind of taking it and making something of it and keeping it. It was about them going out, interacting, gathering it, doing an analysis, and then delivering it back to the people that they were chatting with. That delivery mechanism is starting to show up in interesting ways where the community has an opportunity, as does the student sometime, to become advocates for a specific issue. An example of this was one of our students who was very interested in the food business and restaurants, but she ended up falling into this question that was around how businesses relate to homeless people within her neighborhood and whether the businesses themselves found it particularly interesting or useful to give back to the community and specifically to help with the homeless issue, right? So she went down a very busy street in Harlem where a lot of people are, and she asked a series of the businesses there what their opinion was. She found something out that was a little shocking to her, which was, I can't believe that these businesses don't show any interest in directly helping a social issue as part of their business. I guess they considered their service of providing their business, the business products and goods, as enough. And when she delivered that information from the survey to a neighborhood group that it's a set of residents that meet every month to talk about their buildings and what's going on in their building. And so she went to that meeting because she saw an announcement for it. And she got on the agenda and she had a chance to deliver her research to the folks who were there. And there were maybe a dozen people. Pandemic was still going on. Everyone was wearing masks. She delivered the information. People actually were surprised that their businesses in their neighborhood were not more interested in social issues. And they also said, but what could businesses possibly do unless they're like a food business or something? And then they were able to brainstorm together in that meeting ideas of how those businesses might make change. The follow-up with Janae has been that I pinged her once a few weeks ago and I said, hey, have you followed up with that community group or followed up with any of the businesses to see if they've approached them about that, or have you thought about, getting involved in an organization? She wrote me a really quick email back and just said, hey, that's a fantastic idea. And I was thinking about doing that as I'm more interested in community advocacy these days. So those types of interactions and relationships, and even, pointing a student in a certain direction with the trajectory of their life can be very powerful. So the research may seem on the surface level like a straightforward kind of research question, but the results become very dynamic when that report back step happens over that piece. Next slide. And I'll have Jessica give a quick preview of what this was like. She was with me in a conference where Entrepreneurship Education Conference, and we had this exciting opportunity to deliver information about CEEP. Instead of just talking about CEEP like I'm doing right now, we actually walked the participants through the CEEP process in the room. And I'd love for her to give her impression and the overview of what that was like for her.
Yeah, so this was CEEP as a workshop I consider it like a demo version. So kind of gives you a feel for what the process is like. So it's a very condensed version of it. So if you have a group of people, you split them into several groups. And then, so for example, course of maybe 2-3 hours, depending on how long your workshop is, you split people up and then you give them 20 to 30 minutes to brainstorm a research question relevant to participants' neighborhood or the area that the workshop is being held in, depending on how much knowledge people have of the area. And then after that, there's 20 minutes to discuss the research methods that we use. So in these small groups, they're discussing whether they're going to interview business owners for their projects or whether they're going to use survey methods or observational methods. And so that time is allotted there. And then 20 minutes to collect data. So obviously it's a workshop. So it might not be feasible for them to go out and actually speak to people or collect survey data. So here, what I understand is happening is kind of theorizing and thinking through about expected results. So what might you expect the results of the research question for your findings if you actually did go out and collect this data? And then there's 25 minutes for report back. So this is like the community outreach step where the groups present to each other. So, and then I encourage participants to engage in like kind of discourse about how this question may be relevant for the neighborhood or impact the neighborhood and implications. So that's my very brief overview of CEEP as a workshop.
That's excellent, Jessica. And I will add to that when we're talking about a workshop or, as you mentioned, a demo, which is much more what it's like, the collect data step could be where you go out to other parts of the conference or you go out to people who are in the lobby and you collect some data. But that means that you have to kind of frame your workshop with that in mind. So that's another opportunity. And I look forward to working with Jessica on those kinds of things too in future conferences. She was able to come in hybrid via Zoom, and she was like the giant observer on the screen. But she was able to also engage with the participants and share her experiences working with the students and some of the impact of that. So it was a helpful thing for her to experience, I hope. And at the same time, the report back step was a way for the people who are participants to experience a reconnection to a different set of people, which is how we did it in that group. It is a great opportunity, I think, within that context, especially because there are soft skills that you develop in those types of settings where it's very concentrated and condensed experience. And that could be helpful in this scenario too. So we look forward to building those types of prototypes out for you to utilize in different places. This was an interesting way for us to go through it. And I'll have Jessica walk through these steps here. You can see that the steps always go in the same order. The only step that I would recommend doing pre-work for is the 5th step, which is where you do a little bit of pre-work, maybe connecting people or having people who are coming into a workshop bring a list of community organizations that are in their neighborhood, something like that. But Jessica, go over this.
Yeah, so kind of the same format of the workshop, but kind of an extended timeline. So this, I'll get to that in a second, but this would allow for possible data collection outside of the workshop space. So maybe in the local neighborhood. So it starts with the brainstorming session. So this can be tweaked depending on the timing of the weekend activity. So this is a general timeline for a 2-day weekend CEEP workshop. So you have like around 2 hours to brainstorm your resource question and then also get like a feedback session where you discuss it in your groups as well. And then we go into the second step, same as before, you develop your research methods. You think about whether you want to do interviews, surveys, what type of things you want to do. And then data collection. So this could be 2 to 3 hours and also can continue into the next day. So if, depending on how long the workshop for day 1 would be, this, you can tweak these numbers here. And so the thought would be going out. So depending on how many local businesses or if there are entrepreneurs in the area, you would allot this time for them to go out and then collect their data. Whether it be surveys or short interviews with entrepreneurs. And then on day 2, as I said before, data collection can continue. And then you have a data analysis for around 2 hours. So this is a time where you can look through your interviews. So they should be very short in nature. So usually, maybe 2-minute interviews if you want to do interview style and collect a couple surveys. And this is where people can create graphs if they want to, using Excel and other programs. It wouldn't be an intensive activity. It would just be, just representing kind of what they found during the data collection period. And then also the community outreach, which is the same as the kind of workshop where they would present to the group. Or as Professor Snipes said, local community organizations that were set up ahead of time. And that's approximately like a 2-hour session.
Yeah, and I would add to this little piece here, especially for the community outreach section, if they do end up having that opportunity to bring a community group in or connect with a community group, it's an opportunity to build a relationship around a specific issue. So the program itself, especially if it's focused on business or entrepreneurship or economic development, this is a way for folks to participate in that process of economic development. And then if it's already set up in advance, the community outreach piece could either be done on Zoom, like with a big screen behind you, and you're presenting your information back to a set of people who are on that Zoom, who may be part of the community organization, or it could be several community organizations. With the advent of Zoom and other video platforms like that, meeting platforms, we have this new opportunity to engage with people on a whole new level when it comes to advocacy and outreach outside coming into workshops like this. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, we're going to have to logistically get people from point A to point B, and we're going to have to put them in a hotel room or get them in different situations so that they can actually get to us physically. So just keep that in mind to keep it flexible when it comes to CEEP. Utilize Zoom and make sure you remind your students to utilize Zoom a lot, especially if they feel uncomfortable about the pandemic still and don't feel safe. There's still no reason why, with a lot more effort, sometimes it can be a lot harder if you're not, walking on the sidewalks and chatting with the business owners directly. It can be more difficult, but it's still very doable with virtual opportunities. All right, I want to say thank you guys for joining us. There's so many resources that you can download on citizenpreneurs.com. The Citizen Entrepreneur Explorers program is continuing to grow. Keep your eyes and ears out. Currently we have incentives for teachers and for students to take part in the Citizen Entrepreneur Explorers program. Send us an email, reach out to us on social media, join us on our website, fill out the form. We'll get in touch with you and let you know about those incentives. They're coming out the middle of this, actually in spring, in early spring, you should be able to see those. So we look forward to sharing them with you. And I just want to, bring it back to full screen with all of us on the screen here, and just say for Tristan, I'd love for you to share with us some of your initial impressions of what you've seen being part of CEEP and how you've seen some of the students' activities and how they've been able to engage, or even in some ways how they may have seemed a little fearful about things and perhaps gotten over it.
Yeah, I see, and from what I've seen, I see students, future leaders who are here to solve issues and create opportunities for themselves and their peers. Something very heartwarming that I've seen is a lot of these students really care about the issues that they're tackling, even if they didn't think there was going to be an issue in the first place. And I would say, like it has been mentioned before, that the students might struggle a little bit with community outreach. I think in general, it's always hard to talk to people, especially after a pandemic of not talking to many people. So that's something that students struggle initially with, but eventually were able to overcome. And yeah, I think it's really exciting to see what new projects are going to come out of this semester, having seen the old projects from last semester and years before. It's always surprising to see what students can come up with, and how well they can word the issues that they're hoping to solve and the businesses that they're hoping to eventually open in their lives.
Thank you, Tristan. I appreciate that perspective very much so. And everyone, I just wanted to say a hearty thank you to Jessica, Tristan, and those of you guys who are watching us. Make sure you add your comments down below. Ask us any questions that you might have. We're here for you to either help you get started with CEEP or answer questions that you might have with it. Most importantly, we just want you to find a way to connect back to your community, and we think this is a great way to do that. So look out for us in the future, and I can't wait to hear from you. Thanks a lot, everyone.